An alignment on security and diplomacy concerns paves the way for the first standalone summit with the U.S., Japan, and South Korea. The U.S. president heads to Camp David to meet his counterparts, aiming to cement gains made in the past 2 years. And for more on this trilateral summit, we're joined by Professor Stephen Nagy from the International Christian University. He's speaking from Calgary in Canada. Professor Nagy, let's pick up on a point made by one of our correspondents earlier, speaking from Washington, D.C. Now, she talked about how this summit has been made possible by the alignment of concerns, specifically missile testing in North Korea and concerns about Chinese military capability and its intentions. We have had these concerns for decades now. Why has it taken until now to have this trilateral summit?
Thank you very much for having me. So I think what we've seen is over the past year, North Korea ramp up its missile testing. In fact, it's tested more missiles in 2023 than it's tested over the past 5 years. And it's demonstrated capability as well as quantity that really is a concern of the three partners. In terms of China, China has demonstrated much more assertive behavior in the East China Sea, the South China Sea, and of course, the threats across the Taiwan Straits really does have the potential to impact sea lines of communication that are really important for Japan's economy, South Korea's economy, and frankly, the region's economy. About $5.5 trillion of trade and goods and energy goes through those sea lanes of communication every year. And this not only will disrupt the economies of South Korea and Japan and the United States, but it will have global implications if there's a conflict.
All right, these concerns, they have been there for decades, but you are speaking of elevated reason for extra concern about them. But we're also looking at leadership. So, for example, there was mention as well that U.S. officials were saying they were giving a lot of credit to the Japanese Prime Minister and the South Korean President for, and I quote her, she said, taking the role to lead. So both of them deciding for their own reasons to set aside long-standing, festering historical disagreements, but agreeing to work together now because they each have their own reasons. How much truth is there in that?
Absolutely. I think President Yoon has demonstrated enormous courage in terms of prioritizing the bilateral relationship and trilateral relationship to deal with the challenges of the 21st century, and that is a rising China, which is an assertive state, but also North Korea, which with its weapons of mass destruction. I think that President Yoon has demonstrated a track record of trying to re-engage with Japan, hoping that that re-engagement with Japan will usher political capital back home with the Japanese Prime Minister in Japan reciprocating, and we've seen that. Prime Minister Kishida welcomed President Yoon to Japan, to the Hiroshima summit, to work together in the AP4, the Asia-Pacific 4, alongside NATO to push back against Russian aggression in Ukraine. Really, we've seen these two leaders step up to the plate and really pay at the polls. In both countries, it's not popular to engage with each other, but I think it's important for the prosperity and peace in both countries and dealing with the contemporary challenges both countries are facing with regards to North Korea and China.
Very quickly on South Korea, Professor Nagy, President Yoon, even in his campaign before winning his seat, his place in the office, has been very clear that he wants to make South Korea, and I quote him, a global pivotal state. Now, this phrase has come up again and again since he has become president as well. And the idea is that to uphold and strengthen freedom, peace, and prosperity through global rules-based order and shared democratic values. This stress on values, which goes beyond just North Korea and goes beyond even China, to say that makes it necessary for us to work with Japan because, leaving aside history, we share common values now. Is that picture going down well with the South Korean public?
So first and foremost, I think that President Yoon is very much supporting a values-based approach to diplomacy, but that doesn't mean that he's forgetting the historical past with the Japanese. It's the difference of priority. He's prioritized backdoor diplomacy to try and deal with the historical issues while having a forward-thinking approach to diplomacy and working with Japan to solve regional problems and to bolster South Korea's global pivotal state ambitions. But this is a very different kind of South Korea. It's forward-leaning. It wants to shape global events, and it doesn't want to be shaped by U.S.-China relations. It wants to be part of shaping that relation so South Korea is better positioned. South Korean nationals, they are ultimately looking for real take-homes from the Yoon administration. And if he does get take-homes, if Japan does provide some more explicit apologies and compensation for its wartime behavior, it may push South Korean citizens to support Yoon's policies. At this stage, South Korea is very split. It's a fractured society, and he still needs to do more. And of course, Japan and the United States and other partners of South Korea need to demonstrate to South Korean citizens that Yoon's approach is the right approach. It's going to usher benefits for South Korea and South Korean citizens.
Final question here, Professor. This, of course, U.S. Ambassador to Japan talking up this summit, saying it's creating a new normal, a new it institutionalizes into the politics of each country a new fact in geostrategic landscape. Now, he has reason to be talking this up, but how much weight do you give to it? Do you think that this summit in itself cements all the gains we have seen in the last 2 years in terms of the rapprochement between South Korea and Japan and the increasing cooperation with Washington?
But what we're seeing is a story being created that where Japan, South Korea, and the United States are cooperating at many different levels. The security sphere, and they're agreeing to military drills together. The diplomatic sphere in terms of addressing some of the challenges within the region. The technological sphere in terms of semiconductor cooperation. And of course, the economic sphere, building economic security into the relationship. So I think we're going to continue to see different spheres of cooperation moving forward. Under President Yoon, Prime Minister Kishida, and President Biden, they're going to find more opportunities to deepen the cooperation and expand the benefits of this cooperation for their citizens, but also for the region, which is in badly need for more stability to promote peace and stability within the region.
Thanks so much for joining us this evening and this morning for you. Professor Stephen Nagy speaking to us live there from Calgary in Canada.